Good evening, everybody. Hopefully we're coming through loud and clear. My name's Nick. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the CEO at Threshold Sports, and welcome to this, our final Babble Ride Across Britain preparatory webinar. You'll see a few faces popping up now on your screens, who we've got hosting this evening. So we have Andy, our route director, as experienced person you'll find pretty much on a bike, but also on this particular event. And also our highly experienced event director, Rich, who's joining this evening as well. The aim of this webinar, as with all the other ones, is to answer as many questions as you guys can throw at us, but really just get you as well prepared, address those kind of final niggles questions so that you arrive at Land's End, or if you're joining the Scotland package up at Hopetown House, with as much kind of awareness, control, and calm as possible, because we are on the edge of, it's an amazing adventure. It's potentially life-changing adventure, and it's our job to make that run as smoothly as possible. So before we dive into some of the different sections and things like that, just want to kind of remind ourselves of what we are actually signed up for. About 980 miles of riding. 9 days on the road, or 10 if you include the day arriving down in Land's End. We're going to go through 3 countries. We're going to cross rivers, mountain ranges, ride along the coast. We're going to cover moorland, cities, villages, towns, kind of ancient and new. We're just going to go on this huge journey as a group of people, and it is a proper adventure of a lifetime. The phrase bucket list challenge gets overused, I think, but this is one which I think justifies that title. And with a challenge like that, especially one which is kind of physically demanding, because you will be propelling yourselves up that route you can see on the map there, it's completely understandable to be nervous, to have that adrenaline, to have that kind of fear, that wake up in the middle of the night wondering if you've forgotten something, that anticipation. All of that is completely normal, and will be applying to the people who will probably be some of the first over the line in the evenings, and also some of those people will be coming in with some of the chaperones at the back towards 7 o'clock. But that adrenaline, that excitement, that is why you sign up to do challenges like this one. It's why we get excited about putting them on for teams. That excitement and buzz is just reflective of that feeling you're going to get when you cross the finish line at the end, knowing that all of that effort, preparation was worthwhile. We don't do these things because they're easy. We do them because they're hard, because of that feeling you get when you cross the finish line at the end. So worth remembering when you're doing these final checks and things like that. Take a moment to take a step back. Don't get kind of focused on those tiny details, and just remember about this journey we're going on and why you signed up at the beginning. It's a special thing to be a part of from a crew and rider perspective. But getting into some of that detail and the admin, kind of underneath that overarching journey, the first thing, which I imagine if you're the kind of person who's on this call, you're probably the kind of person who has received this, checked their emails, and read through this. This event booklet has got pretty much everything you need to know about the ride, everything you need to know before, what you can expect on the event. You can see the contents in there on the slide there. We've tried to get all the information in here, so for those people who want to sit down with a large cup of tea or something stronger, you can work your way through methodically, tick things off, work out your kit list, all that kind of stuff, through to your travel and transport. So this should be able to answer pretty much all the questions. Not all of them, I'm sure there'll be some others, but pretty much all the questions you should have before coming on onto Babble Ride Across Britain. So if you've only got time for 5 minutes of this webinar, the most useful thing you can do is actually go back and read all of this. It's accessible on the website, on the top navigation from the Rider Hub. It's been sent through on your emails as well, but that should give you the key information you need. However, we've got a chance now for the next kind of 45 minutes to an hour to dig into some of the detail that we know comes up. We've been doing this since 2010, and we know some of those nuances or some of those things. It's useful to ask those directly. So the next thing we'll talk about is this idea of shared responsibility. So we've talked on the previous webinars, or anyone who's done the event before, we talk about the RAB bubble, or now the Babble Rad bubble. This is the feeling that develops over the course of the ride, where you have this bond between the individual riders and also all the crew who are there supporting you. So we're going to have the best part of 150 people out there with you, putting out marquees, medics, mechanics, route chaperones, caterers, people making your afternoon tea, people handing out your fresh towel before you head into a shower, people look after you at pit stops. We've got event control teams getting you back en route if you manage to miss one of Andy's signs. But there's a huge team supporting you, and then you've got all you guys supporting each other as riders as well. And when that all functions as a really kind of tight unit, that is when the magic of the event happens, and that's when this builds momentum we're saying. However, there are things which are fundamental to that bubble and that community being fostered, and they seem really basic things when we talk about them. But when you've been riding and camping for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days, everyone becomes short-tempered. Everyone wants to get there a bit quicker. Everyone wants their dinner a little bit quicker. Everyone gets a bit grouchy and grousy and things like that. So there's just 3 areas which we want to focus on, which are just really, really important for the whole community on that ride to buy into. Like I said, they seem fairly common sense. But the first one is around safe riding. And Andy, you are going to be best placed to talk through kind of the fundamentals of this. But I might hand over to you on this one. And you're on mute, just to give you the heads up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tups. Cheers. Thanks. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so I think the Tups has done a great intro there. We are on the open highway, and as you said, he used the words, responsibility. We do need to take a bit of responsibility. We have to use some fairly quiet roads in quite a lot of particularly Devon and Cornwall, primarily because it would be very irresponsible of us to put 700-800 riders down the main road, and it would be very unenjoyable. So we set you off in small groups, and we encourage you to ride together as groups. Inevitably, with that many riders, there's a huge range of ability levels. So that means that people need to spread out. And what we tend to find, of course, is the faster riders tend to sort of be fast at most things in life, and they're first away in the morning, and they get into their little groups, and the more experienced riders who've ridden in groups get that. That's one of the reasons we have the chaperones there. There's about 25 chaperones allocated to the event. Obviously, you can't have one each, but the idea of the chaperones is twofold, really. Is to do a bit of policing if groups start to get too big and unwieldy, but equally then to try and help groups form and try and set pace that's going to be sustainable for the stage that people are riding. An ideal size group in most cases is about 8 riders maximum. And going back to that sort of responsibility bit that Tups was on about, if the groups start to get too large, and we have experienced this in the past where people sort of enjoy the wheel they're sitting on, and suddenly it becomes 20 or 30, that makes it very, very difficult for traffic to get past. So, riding 2 abreast is fine. Riding 2 abreast when there's 8 of you, then the car's only got to go past 4 riders. If you're 8 in a line, it's got to go past 8. You'll have seen some of these diagrams that have been shown before. So riding responsibly and communicating really clearly within the group is absolutely vitally important. And that doesn't just mean the people at the front shouting out warnings, but also for people at the back to shout up the group and for the messages to be passed amongst the riders. There's another thing I would always say is don't shout too loudly. Sometimes that can freak people out even more. So it's really important that the communication is clear, unambiguous, and people understand. And there's a whole host of people that talk about car up and car down. I just tend to nowadays to say car front and car back, and allow people to single out as necessary. So it's really important that good riding. If you're a little nervous about riding in a group, then to leave a little bit more space. You save a significant amount of energy, 30%, around about 30%, if you're sat behind someone drafting. There will be days when you're struggling and you want to be taking advantage of the stronger riders. There will be days when you're strong and you see someone struggling and you can help those riders by sitting in front and just towing them along for a bit. And we're all in it together, as Tups has said, and it's not a bike race. We're just riding amongst I was very famously called out a couple of years ago when I started talking about the flower of the day. Tups will remember it well, I'm sure. Yeah. And the whole idea of that was because I just wanted people to stop looking at Garmin's, and I wanted them to start looking at what's actually going on in the countryside that they're riding through. So good group riding is essential. And the other important bit when I talk about the communication is when you get to junctions, particularly crossroads, is you have to look for yourself. You know, if the group goes across and you're slightly off the back, it doesn't mean it's clear for you to go across. The worst accident I ever saw was that situation. So, you know, we can do absolutely everything. We can put the arrows out, we can put caution signs out, but it's important that you ride within your own capability levels and don't get taken in if someone comes flying past thinking they're Bradley Wiggins or Laura Trott on a descent with all that expertise, because they might not have. So ride within your own capability levels is what I would say, and be prepared to ride. I touched on this earlier. Narrow lanes, nice B roads, some bigger major roads, through towns, urban areas, and be practiced at all of those things, and make sure that you, as I said, consider it to other road users as much as to the bike riders.
Thanks, Andy. I think there's a load of good stuff in there, and I think one of the things which we talk about as well is, you know, the interactions with drivers and things like that. There's, you know, arguably culture wars being stoked between drivers and cyclists. 99% of cyclists are probably drivers as well, so they're not two different species or anything like that. But it's our responsibility with a big group of cyclists coming through a community, even if you think someone's in the wrong or you're shouting or you're holding up drivers, you might actually get ahead and not be kind of affected by it. But what you find is if a driver is coming through and you're holding them up, they get more frustrated by the time they get to the next group and the next group and the next group. So it's not like riding on a small group ride when you're out on your own with maybe 4, 6, 8 people. The impact you have on those other drivers, it's a compound situation. So we've got to be more polite than you would normally be on a ride, more understanding, more sensitive to it. Because on all of these things, we'll talk about hygiene. You are not necessarily just jeopardizing your own ride if you don't ride safely, but you're potentially jeopardizing someone else's. And that for us is kind of unacceptable. You know, people have put an enormous amount of time, effort, investment into getting to that start line. And it's about protecting other people's experiences as much as your own. So the safe riding is a non-negotiable on the ride. And if we see people jumping lights, riding unsafely, then you'll get a strike in the same way you would if you fell off the curb as well. If we see 3 incidents of dangerous riding, then we'll ask you to leave the ride. And again, these are not up for debate. The rules of the road are there to be followed, and we can't be in a situation where people are putting themselves and others at risk. So safe riding is a really obvious one. I just alluded to the strike system there as well. We're dealing with some of the heavier stuff to begin with, by the way. The strike system is designed so that if you have a tougher day and maybe you can't quite complete the distance in the time allocated on that day, you get a single strike. So if you don't make the cutoff on one day, we don't send you off the ride. In fact, what we do if you don't make the cutoff on one day is you then get prioritized for the following day to set off first thing. We get you kind of a speedy boarding lane on the start, so we get you off at the front to make sure you have the maximum opportunity to get through the next day and make sure you only have that single strike. So the strike system is there. It's really important we adhere to it. Again, it's one of these non-negotiables from a safety perspective. Say the cutoff is 7 p.m. If you are in at 7 p.m. and 10 seconds, I'm afraid that is still a strike. No matter kind of what the scenario is or anything like that. But like we said, it's a 3-strike system, and that is kind of leveled across absolutely everybody. So we just ask people to respect that. The reason is in the early years of the ride, we would be trying to get absolutely every single person in on every single day. But what that does is that means our chaperone riders, our safety bike riders, our event control teams, all our support functions are then on duty and on call for an extra 2 to 3 hours a day. And what that does is cumulatively, from a fatigue perspective, that stops those people doing their job to a sufficient standard as well. So at our heart, we want every single person to finish this ride, and we will do every single thing we can to get those people and get everybody through to that finish line, completing the challenge they've signed up to. But the only caveat to that is if it prevents us looking after the whole ride safely, then we have things like the strike system in place. Again, there's further information in the event information guide. It's something which should provide reassurance for people because we can pick you up and bring you forward. And lots of people have occasionally made the call. They might hop in the broom wagon to miss, the third leg of a particularly tough stage. If that then allows them to crack on and ride the next 2 days without getting overtired. So it's there to get everybody there safely and smiling at the end. But yeah, appreciate everyone's respect for that.
So just to
Yeah.
clarify that last point, the broom wagon's not a taxi service. It's not if you're feeling a bit tired, we're going to take you on to the next stage. That would still be a strike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just seeing a couple of questions come in. So there's a question around success rate in percentage terms. So I haven't got the figures off the top of my head, but I think it's kind of significantly over kind of 90 to mid 90% of people who finish the challenge they signed up to do. So they might have got a strike within that on one of the days. We had a really tough headwind day on, I think it was stage 7 last year. So we had a high number of people who got in the broom wagon on that day. But overall, it's kind of 90% plus of people will be kind of completing the challenge and rolling over the finish line at the end. In terms of there's a question about the side chute at the start line. We don't actually have that on the first day because it's very difficult because everybody wants to get going early. So we recommend that if you're worried, try and get there a little bit earlier. And we also ask those people who are maybe on the front of the start funnel looking like they could ride 200 miles on the first day, we politely ask them to maybe drop back and don't necessarily be in that absolute first wave because it's about giving everyone the best chance of finishing it. The third point on this one is all around hygiene as well. So we've got this big group of people who are out in all weathers. We're camping, we've got great facilities on the event and stuff like that. But the hygiene piece is really, really important. And again, that's not something which we have to enforce the protocols that we put in place to make sure everyone's looked after. The main issues we have are diarrhea, stomach bugs, and things like that. So those are the bugs which tend to spread most quickly in an environment like this. There's always a risk of COVID, there's always a risk of coughs and colds. But the thing which has the potential to derail the event more significantly is around stomach trouble. So you'll see at all the food stations, at all the toilets, we'll have hand sanitizer available, and we really, really push people to use that. So all those food contact points, it's gloves off, clean your hands beforehand. Every time you're kind of preparing food and things like that, all of that stuff is hand sanitized beforehand. And we'll have, particularly at the beginning on the first few days, we will have people at the pit stops saying, take your gloves off, take your gloves off, take your gloves off. You'd be surprised every year there are people who get pretty frustrated and angry with us for doing that, but we will always push back and explain that if you think of, especially if you're on wet roads and things like that, you're wearing the same gloves day after day, snot, muck, the rest, all on those gloves. They become like a breeding ground for your own germs and things like that. So the hand sanitizing and removing your gloves is absolutely critical, and we make no apologies for pushing really, really hard on that. Other two areas which are really important from a hygiene perspective is your bottles. So we'll have high five on the event. So you start getting kind of sugar and things like that. If it's hot weather particularly, you need to really rinse those out at the end of the day. They become kind of petri dishes for bugs and stuff like that. So rinsing your bottles is really, really important. But we also have sterilizing stuff, Rich, as far as I understand. So people can sterilize their bottles in the evenings as well. Definitely encourage people to do that. It might seem overkill when you're used to riding at home. But again, these are all the things which can derail your ride 6, 7, 8 days in if you get a stomach bug. So we've got sterilizing stuff there. And the third one, without getting too graphic on it, this idea of covering off all those elements which can potentially scupper your ride is you need to, and we've talked about contact points with gloves and hands and things like that, all contact points with the bike are worth keeping as clean as possible. So in particular, when you come in off the bike at the end of the day, again, you think you've been out there for hours and hours, sat in the same cycling shorts, sweating away, you've got muck off the road and all that kind of stuff. Those are not particularly hygienic. They're not particularly hygienic to have next to your skin. In particular, if you start spending a lot of time on your saddle, you get rubbing, things like that, bit of friction beginning to break in the skin and things like that. That's another area you want to keep really, really clean. So the advice is when you come in, get showered straight away, get out of your cycling kit straight away, clean yourself really thoroughly, and then some loose-fitting clothing in the evening to get a bit of airflow is all really, really important. Like I said, not the most glamorous stuff. But these are all tips which we've seen. And, there'll be people probably having a tough time with saddle sores and things like that later on. And then some people find it harder than others, changing kind of climate or weather and things like that. But these are all things you can do to make sure you're not the one who's having a slightly tricky tummy, to make sure you're not the one who's got a slightly sore backside. These are all coping strategies, all stuff we've put in place to make sure you got the best part of going through the ride, having a clear run. So this idea of the community, the shared responsibility, we'll talk about it repeatedly on the ride. It's really worth bearing in mind now, getting into those habits now. So if you're riding and jumping lights on your commute or on your training rides, stop that now. Get used to stopping at traffic lights. The strike system again, get that preparation, get your training in, and the hygiene piece. Make sure you stay clear in the run up to it, because you can pick up a bug in the week or two beforehand, which again doesn't help you. You want to turn up fresh, relaxed, clean, free of bugs. So again, get into those routines now rather than later. We've got a couple of questions I'm seeing as we come through. I'll try and go to them in relevant sections. There's a question from Ben about having the same tent throughout. So we changed tents all through the event. So we did that for 1 year during COVID, but it makes it very, very difficult to actually maintain that year after year. We've never done it pre that 1 year in 21, and we haven't done it since. So you'll get a new tent each year, each night. But again, one of the things we'll talk about is clean your tent out for the next person. We always have examples where people leave it full of their rubbish every now and then and things like that. But this all feeds into that group responsibility. Just take your rubbish with you, leave it in the state that you would want to find it for the next one. There's a question about 2 bottles being provided from Jake. Yep, so you get 2 high five bottles, 750ml bottles at the beginning of the ride. So yeah, you'll get those at the beginning.
Do you want me to do the puncher one, Tups?
What's that, sorry?
Do you want me to do the puncher question?
Yeah, go for it.
So everybody ought to be, we understand people don't, but everyone ought to be able to be self-sufficient and to change a tube beside the road. I appreciate people will be riding tubeless, but even tubeless, you should have a spare tube just in case. The mechanics will be there and you will have the number to ring, but sometimes you can be waiting a long time if they're doing something slightly more urgent somewhere else. So it's really good if you're not yet practiced at changing a tube that you have a little go at doing that. And do it in your kitchen and get used to it rather than beside the road because it might be pouring with rain, etc., etc. So you do need to be able to do that. It would be helpful if you can. Of course, if you can't, other people will be able to help. But please at least try. That would be useful. And then I think there was another one that was more cycling related, was it not? Which one was that?
There's some which we'll come on to with kit and equipment and things like that, and merchandise. We'll cover them in a little bit.
Broom wagon was the other one, wasn't it? The broom wagon there's 2 brooms with a broom van. So the broom seating arrangements, there's 2 9-seaters, and they decant generally at the pit stops. So we hope we'd never get more than 18 people off in one go, because you're all going to be so fit that you're all going to breeze through it.
There's one question just around, do you have to use the water bottles we're providing? Absolutely not. If you want to bring your own, that's completely fine as well. I've also seen, this is more from one from Ed, who's helping out in the background. Lee, our chief mechanic, is actually on the webinar as well. We weren't sure, Lee, if you're actually going to be able to make it in time. So Ed, feel free to patch Lee in, because I'm sure you're gagging to answer these mechanical ones as they pop up. So we've talked about the group responsibility, and that's a theme which will keep coming up repeatedly. In terms of final preparation, we've talked about this in quite a few of the webinars on psychology and things like that. Being worried and being nervous about this is completely normal. Everyone will be. But if there's specific things which bring you out in the cold sweats in the middle of the night, there's still time to actually go out and spend a bit of time kind of confronting those and demystifying them a bit. So classics might be hills or bad weather. Very, very easy to dodge bad weather and just go out when the weather's good, especially this time of year. But get a couple of wet runs in, get used to having to slow down around the corners, all that kind of stuff. So bad weather, hills, whatever it might be, now's the time to go out and have a crack at those little things which you might be nervous about. You'll still be nervous about them, almost certainly, when you come to the live event, but you'll have had that bit where you've taken it on and come back home in one piece. So strong advice would be, think about what you're worried about and see if you can overcome that. And that might also be off the bike. We'll talk about camping and base camp and all that kind of stuff in a little bit. But if you're worried about sleeping out in the field, pitch your tent in the back garden with the sleeping bag you're going to take, with the sleeping mat you're going to take, with the earplugs you're going to put in, with the head torch you're going to use. Just do a dry run. You'll feel probably faintly ridiculous when you're pitching a tent in the suburban garden, but actually you'll feel more relaxed when you go on the event. And if anyone asks, you can just get them to donate to one of the charities. So you're doing it for a good cause. So yeah, have a think about what those things are that worry you, and now is a good time to address them. Right, Lee, you're in. Just in time as well, because we're about to go to final bike checks. So do you want to do a quick headline on how you'd approach this? Any particular things for people to look out for?
Yeah, very happy. I think we discussed putting a link to a little video, which hopefully we can get out to everybody. Nick, I think that sounds like a good plan.
Okay.
If not, if you're not mechanically minded and you're looking to get your bike checked, do it now. Go to a reputable shop, get them to have a look at it. That's probably the best advice I can give you at this stage. I'll put a video out, which we can get out tomorrow potentially, or certainly I can do the video for tomorrow, showing people how to check their bike over. And I think the key information that you need as participants is to know when something's wrong, rather than having the knowledge to fix it at this late stage. If you can identify that you've got a problem, preventative maintenance will help you all the way through this event. It's far better to come and see the mechanics and say, I have an issue, a small noise, something's going wrong, something's not functioning as it should, rather than coming to see us and saying, I had a funny noise this morning and now this afternoon this has fallen off. That's much harder for us to deal with. So, prevention is better than cure. If something's wrong, swing by, let us take a look at it. You've got a couple of weeks to get your bike checked out. I would urge you to get it done sooner rather than later. It's if you go and pick your bike up the day before RAB and something's not right, it's kind of too late at that point.
Okay, thanks, Lee. We've got a few quick fire questions which come in here. So international riders, is it possible to use a pedal wrench as they don't want to bring their own, which is completely understandable. Are there any tools you're happy to let people borrow and things like that? Obviously, you don't want them all disappearing into tents and bags and things like that, but things like track pumps are obviously available for people to sort their own tyres and stuff.
Track pumps will be put out at every base camp. People can pump their tyres up. They're available for you. The guys will help you put your pedals on and off. Yes, at the end and at the start, we'll make sure there are some tools available. But yeah, in general, no, my guys won't want to lend their tools. It's how we make a living. If you had a plumber in your house and said, can I borrow a wrench? He would tell you, probably much more curtly than we would, that he wouldn't lend them. It's just that they disappear, as you say, Nick, and not through any, negative behaviours. It's
yeah.
People are excited, busy, things to do. Pop it down on the floor, gets lost. But certainly we'll have a small toolkit available if anybody really, really, really wants to do it themselves. But otherwise, that's why we're coming. We're here to help as well. So, we'll help as much as we can and get things done for you.
It doesn't make me wonder whether that's why Ed selected that particular photo of one of the mechanics. He's not the kind of guy you want to go and steal stuff out of his toolbox from.
Big John. Big John's the nicest guy ever.
Also, I mean, it's worth bringing just a small multi-tool as well. So there's another question around torque wrenches and things like that, which again, if there's more specialist stuff, which people want to, go to your guys and use, obviously you don't need to bring all that stuff, but equally just when you're on the road, fixes along the way, it's worth having just a little multi-tool with you for small adjustments if you're happy doing that. There's another question from Jake about, in event of bad weather, anywhere to quickly clean off the bikes and top up things like chain oil, etc. So Lee, I know we're working on all these specific products we're going to have, but do you want to just run through what's available from that side?
Yeah, no, there will be a bike wash, fully functional bike wash at each base camp, providing we can, access water. Then we'll have that there for you. There will also be some lube. What I will say to everybody is, please, that's something that you can think about now. one of the most common problems we have is over lubing your chains. They don't need to be dripping with covered in black oil. They need to have some lubrication on them. My guys will help with that if you're not sure, but you don't need to, pour it on like Mazola cooking oil. We ran out of oil about 3 days into the event last year. And that was not just for RAB, that was for RAB and Revolution. So that was a heck of a lot of oil being put on chains. But yes, we will have washing facilities and lube to put on your bikes.
Okay, that's great. Appreciate that, Lee. Sure, there'll be some more which come through as we go, and we'll try and get some of these questions later on as well. So the next bit, Andy, is around getting used to your on the bike kit. So I'll hand over to you on this one.
Yeah, I think a little bit like making sure your bike's functioning properly. It's daft to put a brand new set of shorts on that you haven't perhaps tried beforehand. Tups very carefully explained the issues surrounding short wearing. If it seams in a different place, for example, that can cut you really quickly. So your kit and your choice of kit is really important. Even things like leg warmers that might be too tight can have an impact. So it's really important that you have your kit sorted, you know what you're bringing, and that you've got a good range of kit. It is Great Britain after all. I think someone's just posted up the long range weather forecast, which is actually looking quite promising, which is great to see. However, as a youngster, when I first joined my cycling club, we were always told you'd always wear a base layer, and the reason you wear a base layer is because it actually wicks the perspiration away. But equally, you're not going to, because you're all going to be very competent. But if you should happen to slide, and you've got two bits of material to slide against each other, so these are things that I was taught, and most professional cyclists would follow these days. Arm warmers, leg warmers, potentially that you can put on or put in your back pockets. A cap. Always have a rain jacket, because if you do get caught out on the top of the Lect or somewhere in the Cairngorms and the weather changes. So it's vitally important that you try all these things out. I think Tups was talking earlier about some of your fears and some of your worries, but making sure that you can get all of your stuff into your bike or your back pockets. I think one year I was actually asked to stand up at the briefing and actually take all the kit out in the back pockets to show exactly what was in it. And as I say, gloves, etc. If you think the weather's going to be bad, is important. Overshoes can be useful. But again, practice these things. Don't just turn up with brand new kit and expect it all to function just as you want it to, because sometimes it won't do.
And I think it's late in the day now as well in terms of the preparation, Andy. So I think there'll be people where the temptation is to suddenly go and upgrade, change, throw some money at their worries about lack of training. If your bike is still working smoothly and a kit has lasted you through training blocks and things like that, there's probably more risk in getting all this new kit at the last minute, which we do see in the past.
100%. So I think you not just your clothing, which I talked about primarily there, but absolutely, and Lee will back this up. So new tires, new transmission. If they're all brand spanking new, and it's the first time you've ridden them, you haven't bedded them in, then you can have problems there. So we've got a couple of weeks. If you can, as I think Lee said earlier, if you're going to get your bike checked, get it done now. If things need changing, get those things done, but don't make any drastic changes at this time, particularly in terms of position, etc. Most of the things that we see in terms of positional issues and people who haven't actually ridden for as many hours as they perhaps might have done come along and they get found out on that first day. It's a tough first couple of days. And if you're not riding as much as you might have done, that's when you'll get found out, and it then just becomes an unpleasant experience. So the training, which you'll have all done, I'm sure, is there to make sure that you enjoy rather than endure the event, and you ride it efficiently and at a sustainable pace. And if you've got all your kit right, be that your clothing or your bike, it'll be much more fun.
I think something which, just looking at this picture, has probably changed a little bit over the years as well. One of the questions that came up was around lights. Whether people need lights. So yeah, lights are mandatory on the ride. In September, when we're up early, some of the starts are kind of 6 o'clock and things like that, where it's not pitch black, but it's not far off. So lights are definitely important to have with you, and we won't let you ride if you don't have them on those early starts. Another one just in there, so there's a picture of a saddlebag on there. I think this is something where people are more open to having a bit of like a handlebar bag or something slightly larger. Beforehand, I think everyone would have been around shaving the maximum amount of weight, cutting a toothbrush in half type thing. Whereas now, especially for a ride like this, having a little handlebar bag or a bag, saddle bag or something like that, where you can have your waterproof in there, maybe your phone or a camera, a few extra snacks, things like that, just a few comforts which don't weigh much. But you see it in the past where people, I don't want my jersey to look out of shape, so I'm just not going to take a waterproof. And then sure enough, kind of 3 hours later, they're absolutely kind of shivering away at a pit stop somewhere. Carrying a little bit more, which is going to keep you comfortable or make you enjoy that ride or keep your nutrition levels up, an extra bit of chamois cream, things like that. Those are all things which will make the ride hugely more enjoyable rather than trying to skimp on the stuff you take with you. And there's some great little bags and saddle bags and things like that you can take with you. So I definitely think pack for a little bit more comfort rather than saving a couple of 100 grams here or there. It's probably going to make the experience a more pleasant one.
I think just to add to that, Tups, we have had people riding on hybrid bikes. You're absolutely right. When this first started, there was a lot of people that kind of thought of it as a bit of a race, and there was lots of very lightweight bikes. And for the reasons I stated at the start, we have to go down some pretty tiny roads in places which are potholed. So a good sturdy bike with some fairly chunky tires on 28s, which are pretty much 28s, 30s, 32s are pretty much standard these days, will make much of a difference. And some people will ride with mudguards because obviously, as I said, it's the UK. There's a couple of interesting questions that have just come in, actually, Tups. I've just heard about the route dynamic risk assessment. People talking about the files going out. Some people have already loaded the files. There's some very minor changes that we've already noted. We do the risk assessment drive twice. We do it in April, do the whole route, and then we do it again in the next week. And once we've done that, we do it as close as we can to the event, so that any major changes, new housing estates, whatever it might have gone up, we can be absolutely 100% with those. However, there will also be the arrows, and the arrows are more important than the GPX files. The arrows are put out the day before, and they go out by the team that are doing the risk assessment with us, and they will obviously take precedence if there's been a change the day before through bad weather or anything else. And then there's an even further check where the lead car goes out with any spare arrows if we need to make changes. So be prepared, but we will send out the very latest files at the end of next week. I'm sure that's when they're going to go out. Someone's asked if it's worth getting a bike fit at this late stage. My personal view on that would probably be you're right on the cusp. I don't know what Lee thinks on that. I think you're right on the cusp. If you had a bike fit now, if you rode for a couple of weeks in that new position, then maybe you get time to adapt to it. But I think I might be tempted not to do that because it might be not work so well.
I'd agree with that. I mean, if you're struggling and that's why you're going for the bike fit, there's pain, then yes, maybe roll the dice because you're already losing. But if you're reasonably comfortable, I totally agree with Andy. The way we do bike fits is we'd have an initial consultation and have you back after 2 weeks to make more changes. It's a dynamic process.
Someone's asked if the roads are paved throughout all stages. Sorry. Tups.
Yeah, go for it.
I think that's a really important one. There are some very narrow lanes in Cornwall, which as I said earlier, we have to take to avoid the A30. I would be very, very irresponsible to take down there. It's a balance we have to strike. Also in Cheshire, we have to take some very narrow single track lanes. But again, we're not in a bike race. These are some of the most beautiful parts of the countryside, and the point is to take your time, look out for where you're going, make sure that you ride safely, as we talked about earlier, and enjoy the countryside.
Yeah. I've got a few questions coming through. So we'll try and go through a little chunk before going on to the next lot. We might be slightly out of order. So Rich Armstrong, to the roads warrant bringing my Cane Creek Thudbuster seat post, extra weight. I'm not familiar with the Cane Creek Thudbuster myself, but I haven't seen many suspension seat posts on the ride, and I think you're probably okay with that, would you say?
Personally, I'd say so. Yeah, I mean, so it goes back to the last question. The roads are all paved. Some are just a little bit more potholed and a little bit more gritty, but the majority are fantastic. So I wouldn't.
Staying on a similar region, do the pit stops still have the Sudocrem pots available? We do have various bits and pieces like that at the stops. So yeah, it's not a kind of limitless supply. It's a bit like Lee getting through about 15 days worth of chain lube in the first 3 days. We keep an eye on it. He asks people to bring their own if there's a particular one they want to use or to sort themselves out in the morning. But if they need a top up or a dab here and there, we'll have some. But there is a no double dipping rule, which is rigorously enforced. So there's quite a few GPS questions coming through, which I think we've covered in that dynamic risk assessment. They'll be updated after that.
A couple of mechanical ones,
yeah.
Nick.
Do you want to take those, Lee?
So I've seen a few questions specifically about DI2. You shouldn't really have a problem, to be quite honest. An average rider should be able to do this event without recharging their DI2. What tends to happen is that people have a problem when they're charging. They're either like got a loose connection or they've lent their bike and it's discharging while it's going. What we found the best solution is if you plug your DI2 into a charging brick. That is by far the best way. You get clean power. Just check the voltage on your brick. But any of those modern, portable, battery charger things will do the job. That's what we use in a mechanic's tent. 9 times out of 10 with DI2, once we've recharged your DI2, you're back on the road. That is the most common fault with DI2. So make sure it's charged before you go. Make sure it's not discharging because you've lent your bike up against something. And take a brick with you that you would use to charge your phone and charge your DI2 that way. That's the best advice I can give you. And then there was a question about tubeless. Personally, if I ride tubeless and I carry a tubeless repair system with me, I use Dynaplug. There are other systems available. I wouldn't carry a spare tire with me while I was riding. You've got support at the pit stops. Worst case scenario, if we can't repair it, we can replace it. If you don't want to replace it, we'll stick a tube in for you. So no reason to be riding 1970s style with a spare tire over your shoulders.
Okay. Nice one. I've seen one just around group riding being mandatory. It's not mandatory. It's recommended. So some people do love riding on their own and they're strong enough to do that. So absolutely, you're not forced to ride with other people. It's just recommended. And the other one around group riding was how that's set up. Do we have fixed speed groups at the start? Andy, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, we did try this one year, and it didn't work. And what tends to happen, of course, is people don't really know what speed they're going to ride at. It might be a headwind, it's going to be hillier. They get mixed up with people who are stronger, so it tends to form naturally. We let natural selection sort of help make that happen. And I think the onus, we talked about taking responsibility. The onus then is on the individual. The biggest mistake people make in any of these mass participation type rides is actually riding too hard, too early, and actually burning too much glycogen and running out pretty quickly, and then it's a miserable experience for the rest of the day. So you need to be prepared to think to yourself, this is going too hard, and then to look over your shoulder and sit up and form another group and enjoy the ride. I remember being given a piece of advice by an ex-professional rider once. He talked about the Brits that take part in these tap tours and things like that, and they're getting dropped, and then they're just busting their backsides to try and get back on again. And you just, the clue is they've just been dropped. Just sit up, wait for the next group to come along, and form another group and ride at a comfortable pace. So I think setting people will get a rough idea. We can give a rough idea, but it's not as prescriptive as it might sound, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Just looking through, there are some which we'll come to when we talk about other sections in base camp and things like that. So we might skip on a little bit from now. So one of the questions was just around merchandise. So this is available to order, but you collect down at Land's End. So there's a few questions about it. Will you get it prior to arrival or collect it when you're down at Land's End? You'll collect it. Exchanging jerseys, if they don't fit, that will be dependent on availability. So everyone will get the ones they've ordered in the size they've ordered. But if there's any changes, we can switch around if we've got any spares. And the ability to buy merchandise at camp is dependent on availability. So definitely recommend buying in advance. We're trying to just basically eliminate significant wastage, which has happened in the past. So hence pre-orders. But we want everyone who wants to have kit to get it. So if it's not on the ride, we'll try and do a post order or something like that, subject to demand. So hopefully that covers off some of the merchandise questions. Fueling, a high five. So quite a few questions around this. So a question from Jake around what high five products are available, and asking whether he needs to bring some with him. So Rich, I might hand over to this detailed topic.
Good evening, everyone. It's a nice, simple one with high five. There'll be a range of gels at every pit stop, every base camp. You can help yourselves to gels in 3 flavors. There'll be energy drinks available, again, at both pit stops and the base camps, and 0 tabs for electrolytes. You'll also find recovery drinks, but they'll be positioned primarily for finishes in the evening for base camp arrival.
Okay, great. So that covers off the products available and when they're available. We talked about cleaning out bottles and things like that. It's really helpful. Someone's asking what distance the checkpoints and water stops are. So Andy, you can probably pick this one up.
Yeah, I mean, roughly we're looking at sort of, I think the average route distance is 105 miles. So we try and make it third distance and 2/3 distance. I think stage 4, it's fairly rural to say the least, but that's the longest. And I think we're just about 40 miles to the first pit stop, but it's a fairly flat day that day. So majority of them around about 33, 35 miles. There might be give or take a mile or 2 on that, but that's roughly how far apart they are.
Okay, good stuff. And there's a question just around releasing from Alan when we release the locations for the pit stops. So we talk about those the evening beforehand. So what we don't want is everyone's friends and family flooding towards those, because some of them are limited space and we need to prioritize all the riders. So there'll be, you can find out where they are in advance on the night before. But if you're looking to meet friends and family and things like that, it's worth just identifying on the route where you can stop off and finding cafes and things like that, rather than bring them to the main pit stops, is really appreciated, because we've had that in the past. There's a couple of other questions just around other brands of sports nutrition and things like that. Obviously, there are many different brands of sports nutrition. We provide High Five. They're a really supportive partner of the ride, which is great. But if you want to bring your own, that's absolutely fine. You can do that. It's just a case of working out what suits you. So yeah, there's certainly open to bring other stuff. I know one year a guy bought about 6 bottles of elderflower cordial in his bag, so he paid a little bit more for the extra weight, but seemed to be very happy. Got him through every day. It's his little luxury that he wanted. So whatever works for you. So the next bit is just around some of the base camp life, and we've mentioned about applying the same approach of preparation. What are you worried about? Getting practice using the kit and equipment you've used for your training actually in the base camp. The luggage allowance we have is 16 kilos on the event, and most people go, oh, that's not much. I need everything for 9 days with my cycling kit and things like that. The reality is that is set for a reason, and that is because much beyond that, you tend to be bringing stuff you don't need, or it's luxuries which you have to pack, repack, carry around, and things like that. So this is sufficient from our experience to pack everything that you need. We talked about this isn't a fashion show, and you'll realize that probably day 2. Everyone is wearing the same stuff nearly every night, the same big warm jacket, the same hoodie, the same tracksuit bottoms, the same shorts, the same Crocs. I mean, the minute Crocs get involved, it's hard to call it anything other than functional footwear, and all the stuff you're bringing is there to be comfortable, to some extent to aid your recovery. So we'd steer clear of the skinny jeans and things like that. But actually it's about being comfortable, being warm, and having all that stuff you need. So the kit list is really thorough, lists out everything you need. So dig into that. And that should answer everything you need. A few ones just to pull out. Waterproof bag is really helpful. We are loading and unloading, and you'll be carrying your bag between a tent and where we basically have in color zones. Your bag will be as near as possible to that, but it's not all undercover. You're not collecting it from a hotel reception and wheeling it to your room. So you want something you can chuck on your back, ideally, and something waterproof as well, because the weather will whistle around the trucks and things like that. It's very hard to keep everything dry. Another piece of advice, if you can get something colorful that stands out, that makes life easier when you're trying to spot your bag amongst a couple of 100 other ones as well, if you're in a hurry stood in the rain. So something colorful and waterproof is a good start point on your bag. The other one we'd definitely recommend is waterproof footwear for the base camp. Now, these don't need to be kind of proper giant size wellies. They can just be waterproof trainers. There's a little picture here. You've got those kind of short little boots. We're often on grass, we are on grass for all our camping. And if you're walking back and forth to your tent, if it's wet and raining and things like that, it'll soak through your trainers pretty quickly. So we'd definitely recommend some waterproof shoes for around the base camp even if the weather's dry, you get a lot of dew in the morning, and getting out of bed, putting on dry socks, and then stomping off to the dining tent and getting wet socks in the first 5 minutes of the day isn't ideal. So waterproof bag, waterproof shoes are really good additions. Other than that, the packing list is pretty good in terms of what you should be looking to pack. So there's a couple of questions around extra luggage. So the deadline for that was for the 5th of August. But Rich and I were in touch with the guys at EB to see if we can open that up again, because I know some people have been asking about that. So if you still want to get the extra luggage allowance, drop us an email. It might take us a few days to get back and come back with a response, but we're looking into that at the moment, whether it's possible to add any more to that. It's 25 quid for an extra 5 kilos on top of the standard allowance. That should definitely be enough to carry it. And we'd also suggest, making sure if you're bringing a sleeping mat and things like that, make sure you can get it in your bag as well. You don't want to be strapping stuff onto the side of your bag for the same reason around waterproofing. If your sleeping mat is exposed to the elements, it's going to be a less comfortable night's sleep than if it's all tucked neatly into a good waterproof bag. So a few bits in there. There's a question from Juliet around, can you buy stuff at the base camp, clothing and camping gear and things like that? Unfortunately not. We can't provide that, unfortunately. So we do have occasional examples where people try and order Amazon deliveries to base camps further down the track. It's not ideal, and there is a risk of stuff getting lost because sometimes they have to go to various different locations, and sometimes they are just a field in the middle of nowhere. So that is a possible emergency backup, but also there'll be times when you're riding through different towns, and you can always jink off the route for a mile or so to pop into a Halfords or a Go Outdoors or something like that. And let's bring them to pick up some things as well. But we don't sell additional stuff on site. Di2 charging cables, I think we've covered. Labeling of kit. So you'll get a luggage label being sent with your reg pack. So all the bags are labeled with those as well, and that will match your wristband on there as well. I think, Rich, I don't know if you're looking at questions as we go through, but any other particular camping ones as we go through, we can always come back to them towards the end.
I suppose just a couple of bits there about the Plus package for any Plus riders. You'll find that your pickups each morning can vary a little bit, just depending on how far your hotel is from the base camp, but usually no more than 30 minutes drive. So you'll find your pickups are around about 5 a.m. each morning. We try to get you back to base camp in time for breakfast. So hopefully that answers that one.
Great. Okay, so we'll go, there's a quick schedule in here just around what a potential day looks like. Again, we spent a bit of time talking through this on on previous webinars. This is not fixed for everybody. So breakfast is open, say 5:30. You do not have to be there at 5:29. In fact, we'd strongly recommend, if you're a slightly stronger rider, give yourself the half-hour rush for people who are really desperate to get out on the road. Let them go. There's always plenty of food. We're not going to run out. You're more likely to just drift through to the front of the queue and have a smoother run in the start. So these are guideline, the opening and closing times are fixed, but we strongly encourage you to work out a routine that works for you. It's not about everybody. We don't want 700-800 riders queuing up at 5:30 for breakfast. That means the queues will be slightly longer. Inevitably happens on the first day because everyone's a bit nervous, but then that usually settles down throughout the duration of the event. We have looked to upgrade our coffee facilities as well to be able to get through more people as well. So Rich and I have been looking into that recently because I know that's sometimes we had one person who's having about 8 espressos before leaving base camp in the morning. So whatever it takes to stay on schedule. Couple of questions which came in. Do we have an allocated start time each day grouped by predicted pace? So again, no, that's done fluidly, and it's this idea of if you're a fast rider, it helps if you go a little bit further back. And if you've had a strike, we'll bring you to the front to get you going early. Rough day timeline for the Plus package, Rich, I think we've kind of touched on this. It's in page 12 of the event guide, but it's fairly fixed with depending on where the hotel is.
Yeah, that's right. Departures in the evening tend to be after dinner, once you've heard the safety briefing in the evening, but there's sometimes some flexibility for earlier riders to go back sooner. The Plus team will look after you, will keep you informed each day around locations and the options there.
Great. Conscious of time rattling on, but we can continue from a threshold perspective. But I'll try and go through some fairly swift ones. So the question about hair dryers at camp. Yes, they will be there. I didn't say he requested that. The tent allocation, so that's an important one. People want to camp together. It's done. Your tent will be allocated when you come into camp. So if you are with the person you want to camp next to, then you'll be able to camp next to them. But we don't run a system where we allocate all the tents separately. We rotate it round by colour zone so that each individual colour, which will be broken into at the beginning of the event, will have one where you're a bit closer to the dining areas and showers, and the next day you might be a little bit further away. But if you come to the tent allocation at the same time, then you'll be in a tent next to one another. This question from Jason, can we leave the camp and come back in the morning for breakfast ride and start? That's absolutely fine. We just need to know, so you'd sign out from the info desk. There's a question around disabled toilets. So Rich, I hand over to you on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. For wheelchair users specifically, the showers and toilet trailers both have ramp access. If it's not in place at the time that you go, just have a word with a member of crew. We'll get that hooked up for you. The plastic loos that tend to be closer to the camping areas, there are some disabled units as part of those. If you have any sort of disability, especially not a visible one, anything that might affect your use of the base camp facilities or how you enjoy the ride, and you haven't declared it on your active form when you registered, or perhaps you now have more information, please do get in touch. Anyone who's declared any sort of disability, we're getting in touch with just to find out a bit more about how we can support you. So if you have something that you think you might not have declared, you might need some additional support, or just want some more information before the ride, just drop us a note and we'll get around to talking to you before we get to land end.
Great. Thanks, Rich. A few more quick ones. So there's a question around, is ice available in the evenings to help recovery? Unfortunately not. The medics will have a small supply for very specific stuff, but not for everybody. And there's another question around sports massage and things like that. So Rich, do you want to talk through the provision that we've got? Because it's not everyone gets a massage every evening, is it?
No, quite sadly not. We don't have the space nor the number of therapists nor the time to be able to get through everybody that might want one-to-one treatment. The massage partner, the sports therapy partner rather, will operate a really a sophisticated triage service where they'll get to know you, get to know what you're going through, and they will try to prioritize people with the greatest need for one-to-one treatment. Well, there will also be alongside those one-to-one treatment areas is a scheduled lead stretching session, and they will happen frequently throughout the time that riders are arriving into base camp every evening. You'll find that schedule written on one of the black chalkboards as you wander in. There's so much that you'll be able to do to stay independent, to take care of yourself with assisted and led stretching sessions. So please try to only have one-on-one treatment if you really need it, and the sports therapy team will help you make that decision.
Thanks, Rich. We've got a couple of questions on bike racking and storage. So they are stored in secure areas, but they are open to the elements. So this is how we've always done it. We have security team. We've actually beefed up our security a little bit with high fencing and things like that around it for this year. The question was whether they can bring, someone's asking if they should bring or could bring a cover for their bike. They are welcome to, but I don't think I've seen one in the last 10 years. So it's very much down to kind of personal preference, and they would have to look after that, drop it into their bag, pack it up, bring it back out the next day and things like that. But no, they are out in the elements, but they are watched by our security team overnight, and they're checked in and out of the racking area based on your rider number to make sure it matches the number on your bike. Okay, last quick couple of slides, final bookings. And we've got a few questions which we might pick up at the end. Transport bookings, they're all done by European Bike Express. The laundry booking, I think, is done by your My Events portal. So this allows you to wash 6 items, I think 6 items per wash on day 2, day 4, and day 6, and they are handed in at the end of one day's riding, and you collect them fresh and dry the next day. So you can book that on there. There's further information on the event info guide. Additional luggage allowance we've talked about. Merchandise we've discussed already as well. Sportographs, so the photos are amazing, and we tend to get a lot of people taking up this offer, so worth getting that 25% discount if you want to get those photos, and that's again linked through the My Events portal. They'll be right the way up the country over the course of those 9 days. And a final quick one as well, this Wednesday, if you're in or around London, we've got an event at the Rafa store in Soho with 2, well, frighteningly impressive riders who'll be joining us on Babble Ride this year. So James Golding, fresh off a tilt at Race Across America, and Yasmin Muller, world record breaking endurance cyclist. So they're going to be going for a short ride out of the Soho Rafa store at about 6:30 on Wednesday evening before coming back for a quick talk and Q&A with those guys. So if you want to meet the team and meet those 2 guys before joining on Babble Ride, you're more than welcome to come along and sign up for that as well. But the final slide, before we go through into those final questions, is just a recap around this kind of responsibility. Now's the time to get into that headspace of safe riding, taking personal responsibility, getting that hygiene up to speed, and that means you'll effortlessly cruise into the experience of life on the road, and before you know it, we'll be ticking off those miles as we roll out of Land's End, and you'll be in Oakhampton, you'll be on your way up to Bath, and all these things you've been thinking about and planning and visualizing, you'll actually be there in the thick of it. But getting into that routine and rhythm and getting the sense of that group responsibility is probably the most important thing we can do before everyone gets down to Land's End. So, final questions. I'm going to try and recap and look through some of the questions coming in on the group. So some of these I think we've probably covered. GPS tracking service. So I think this is, again, an optional extra, so it's probably best to look in the event information guide, but you can rent a GPS tracker for the duration of the event, and that will ping out a live track of where you are, which is great if you've got friends and family or fundraisers tracking you. So that's that we linked through the website and the event info guide. Working my way back up. Mozzie nets, how crucial. I haven't worn one in my years on doing RAB. There was one year at Fort William, one base camp was pretty bad. However, I did read an article which said it was very damp and it's bad midges this year. And there's a risk of, I think they called it like a third hatching, which sounded like something out of the new Alien film. So I will probably be packing one this year just in case. But historically, they've usually been packed and then been returned unpacked. But you know, they're not very expensive. Might be worth chucking in your bag if you're nervous. Are we putting up your own tents? No, those will all be lined up ready for you when you arrive in camp. Slide breakfast at 5:30. Sarah has said it was last webinar was 5 a.m. Rich?
5:30, 5 a.m. alarm, 5:30 start of breakfast service.
Okay. And sometimes we bring that earlier if we're starting earlier. So it might have been that example, or it might have just been a mix-up on the last one. Dietary requirements, gluten-free, etc. Is it clear where food at feed stops and base camp can be found? Rich, I'll let you take that.
Yeah, for sure. Dietary requirements, pit stops, please ask the pit stop crews, particularly if it's something that means we don't have a large supply of it. We will keep it out of sight. You will have been catered for. We will get to know you. The pit stop crews will get to know you particularly well if you have a specific need, but they will probably keep it out of sight to make sure that it doesn't get taken by others. So please do ask. If it is at base camp, it will be labelled. All of your food in the evening will be labelled. And if you pre-disclose any very specific dietary requirements that we've catered for, again, you'll get to know the team there and they will make sure that you know what to grab.
Great. Thank you. There's a quick one here. Transport from base camp to the hotels after rider briefing for the plus package. Yeah, that is the case. Laundry, we've touched on it briefly, but effectively you will drop your laundry we'll announce that it's laundry night. Everyone brings their laundry. You get a mesh bag. you put those items in, and they effectively get washed in that and then strung on a line which is within the bag. So that will all be ready for you to collect the next morning. Again, falling into the category of personal responsibility, there's a limit on the number of items you can put in there for a reason, and it outlines what that is. The reason being, if we say 6 and you put 12 items in, then we will not be able to hang 12 items on that length of drying rope. And so what will happen is your kit will not be dry. So again, these things where there's a reason why it's all set up like this. But if everyone follows that routine, then it should be ready, prepped for you to collect fresh the next morning.
Just to add there, Tups laundry is an optional extra. It's not for everyone. Please purchase it if you will need it. And it is at 3 times during the ride in Bath, at Haydock, and at Edinburgh. So days 2, 4, and 6.
Yep. So I'm just having a look at other elements. There's a question, Andy, for you. How much riding shall I be doing over the next 3 weeks? This person said they've done about 8 100-milers already. So it sounds like they're in good shape.
Yeah, I absolutely. I mean, it's a very difficult question to answer because I don't know how much riding overall people are doing. So, if you've done 8 100-mile rides, then if you can get a couple of good rides in this weekend, bank holiday, hopefully, if time permits and it's convenient, then that would be useful. And then kind of back off, but don't back right off leading up to the event. A few shorter, maybe sharper rides, and then the week before, just making sure everything's ready and packed. That's kind of your taper time.
Yeah. Okay, we've got someone asking how bad is the lect? Someone is Joe's replied saying not too bad. I've been more concerned about days 1 and 2. Andy, I'll let you.
I think that's the best answer I've read on the questions all night.
Yeah.
I think absolutely days 1 and 2 are, if you look at the profile, it's just like a sort of a saw. You're up and down all day long. So it's just the cumulative effect of all those short, sharp climbs. Whereas the Lect is quite a steep climb, and there's absolutely no shame in getting off. People get off and walk quite a lot of the hills, and if that's what it takes to get you forwards. And I always say this to people: if you can keep moving forward, you're every time you take a pace, you're getting closer to the end goal. So, absolutely no shame in that. If you have to get off on a steep climb, then by all means get off. The Lex is a steep climb, but yeah, days 1 and 2 are definitely grippy days, and you'll get to learn that word from me for sure. Grippy.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a question: what happens at John O'Groats? What happens to the finish and through the rest of the day? So at John O'Groats, we've got finish gantry. You get your medal. There's hot food, there's showers, your bag will be there, there's bike transport, and it's a kind of very short walk just down to the signpost to the finish, so you can get your photo down there with your bike and things like that. So people come in obviously at different times. Some people head off very quickly, some people have friends and family there to pick them up. So there's lots of different people doing different things at the finish. The one piece of advice I give to everybody is, if in doubt, book a later shuttle than you might think, or later transport than you might think, because all you need is one nasty headwind on that final day, which pushes everything back. And instead of having an hour or a couple of hours to reflect, relax, go down, buy a small bottle of whiskey, look over the Orkney, get your photo by the sign, you have some people racing in and then crossing the line, grabbing a medal and being on the bus a couple of minutes later. And that feels like no way to celebrate. Not that the bus isn't great. You'll be very relaxed to be kind of heading back home probably, but it's no way to kind of celebrate that final moment of completion. So lots of people doing different things. My advice would be, if in doubt, give yourself a little bit more time at the finish. There's a question about when numbers are being sent out. Rich, you might know when fulfillment's getting finalised.
Yeah, I've just popped a note in reply to one of those questions. Expect them from the last week of August, so I wouldn't be looking out for the postman next week, but the week after, you start expecting them. If yours doesn't arrive, there's no need to contact us. Please just go straight to the registration desk when you get to Land's End. Okay.
There's a couple of questions which are more EBE focused about removing saddlebags and top tube bags from bikes and things like that. So that's a question for European Bike Express. And someone's also mentioned the coach due to go from Exeter Services has been cancelled. So again, we can look into that. That's news to me, but we can find out why and what the next best solution would be. There's various other questions about the plus package and things like that, about transport to the accommodation and back, and whether you shower at the base camp or back in the hotel. Rich, I don't know if you can share a little bit on that.
I would take your advice from earlier, Tups, and shower as soon as you get into the base camp. Obviously, all of the hotels that we use have ensuite bathrooms, so you'll be able to shower there again in the evening or in the morning, should you wish. But just in the spirit of getting out of your cycleware as quickly as possible and having a comfortable dinner at the base camp, we'd recommend that you shower with us as soon as you've finished your ride.
There's a couple of other showering questions. No towel is required. So, well, more specifically, we provide the towels. Fresh towel every evening. So you don't need to bring a towel with you or worry about drying that. There's a question around queues for showers, food, loos, a constraint that we need to account for in planning our time at base camp. It's for that number of people, if you go at the absolute busiest time, there will be sometimes queues at breakfast, sometimes there'll be queues in the showers, sometimes there'll be queues in the toilets and things like that. So it's not feasible to provide a setup where everything is queue free. It's not feasible in terms of space, or it would cost 5 times as much to put the event on. So the numbers and the amount of stuff we have there is what we think is a good balance over the last 10 years or so of running this event. So the point around a constraint planning your base camp time, the most helpful and the best thing to do is if you see there's no queues at the shower and you're ready to have a shower, jump in at that point. If you realize that if it's a nice sunny day and everyone's sat outside in their cycling kit having a shower until the sun goes down and everybody then wants to go and get warm and showered, then that's going to be a bit of a longer queue. So it requires a bit of kind of just personal awareness. But if in doubt, if you see there's not a queue and you can go and do something earlier or later, then that will help kind of decrease the height of that bell curve of people all going for stuff at the same time. But it should be limited queues, and we try and manage that by encouraging people not to spend 15 minutes in the shower if they don't need to, or if there's a queue. There's a question about draft beer hasn't been chosen yet. I think it varies up the country depending on local provision. So I don't think there's a simple answer for that one, Rich, unless you say otherwise.
No, that's right. You'll find a different range of local ales being served at different base camps up the country, and perhaps the odd national beer as well, but different each night.
So what food is available at base camp? Rich, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, a big range of stuff. We try to make sure you don't have the same meal twice up the country, but if you arrive into the base camp between about 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 5 o'clock, you'll find the afternoon tea menu, which sadly is not scones and cucumber sandwiches, it's soup and rolls to keep you going until the evening dinner. And evening dinner is always hot food, a range of things through the week, things like pastas, wholesome sort of home cooked food. You'll all get to know Lulu's cooking very well, and it's very much a famed feature of the ride.
Okay, so there's questions come through just around hygiene and tent sharing. So we've obviously made a big focus around the hygiene, the importance of that. The tent sharing is something we've done every single year except one. And the hygiene, this is based on all the guidance we get from our health and safety officers, and also just experience over different years. The actual sharing of tents is not the major contributing factor. What we do have is anyone reports with any illness or anything like that, we have a separate set of tents so we can isolate them. So anyone with a bug will be moved out of those shared tents and moved into a separate one. But the main contact points all around food, toilets, showers as well. So I understand in a way, if we can have everything isolated and every single person has their own section right the way through the ride, then that would reduce the potential risk of transmission further. But all the advice we've been given and all our experience on this ride suggests that if we adhere to the health, safety and hygiene protocols we've got in place, that should be sufficient. We can't stop people turning up on the ride with bugs and illness. We always encourage people to report to the medics if they have any issues around D&V. We can't force people to do that. It's very, very difficult if people don't tell us. So there's always challenges of enforcing it and making it a totally sterile environment. But the tent sharing has historically not been a risk because of that reporting being moved into separate tents. I'm trying to see if there's any other questions popping in. I'm not sure if you guys have seen stuff coming through at the same time. Food at base camp.
Just to address one specific thing around GPS trackers that I think has been asked We'll share some more information in one of the final participant emails that you'll receive before Land's End, just about how you can share that link for family and friends to be able to track you. Some people have observed that it appears you have to download an app for £3.99 to be able to have your family and friends monitor you. That's not the case. They will be able to track you for free. So we'll share some further information.
Okay. A couple of other ones just sprinkled in amongst the questions here. So toilet stop etiquette, people who maybe need to go a little bit more than others. We really don't want people lining up on the side of the road and peeing. You know, we are going through these people's backyards, their beautiful landscapes and things like that. We have toilets at all our pit stops, but also you're going through towns, villages, shops, pubs. So we really, really encourage you to stop and use proper facilities as you go along. It's great if you guys stop off at cafes, pubs, buy a coffee, packet of crisps, things like that along the way. If in absolute extreme situations you can't help yourself, we really ask for you to be completely out of sight, because it's a serious issue. And again, these are the things which can stop us being able to do rides like this in future. So again, it's that kind of common sense discretion. If it was your backyard or your street where your kids are playing on, 700 people turning up and peeing in your garden would probably leave a sour taste. Any other ones? I think most of these questions seem to have wrapped up now. So I think we may have missed a couple, for which I apologise. But please do come through and email us or drop us a line or get on the forums as well. They're super helpful already in this chat. Lots of people answering each other's questions, which is great. But hopefully that has reassured you on a couple of points. So it's normal to feel nervous, a sign that you signed up to something exciting. But these final couple of weeks, just enjoy that preparation, enjoy being out on your bike, enjoy being fit and healthy. Before you know it, we'll be getting you registered down at Land's End, and off we go. We'll start another big trip north. Personally, can't wait. It's going to be great. Anticipation's building with all the team and all the crew. Can't wait to get out there. Enough of the planning, and we'll get on to the riding. Alrighty. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Ed. Supporting in the background as well. Really appreciated. And we'll see you guys soon. Bye.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.